Hey, good morning. Sorry, it took a few minutes later, but finally we can start. So, bon dia, good morning, bonjour. It's a pleasure to present you this morning the mission of the Black Jaguar Foundation. And it's quite an ambitious mission, maybe one of the largest biodiversity corridors on the planet. So it has taken 7 years of preparation before we really take off. And this morning we take the time to share with you how the mission started, where we are today, and where we will be in 15 years. So I will explain already a bit more. So the content of the presentations, I will share the start of the foundation, how it all began. Joël will present more about the project itself and its impact. And then our colleague, Dimitro Scheveningen, from our team in Brazil, has joined as well to give you more insight about the restoration techniques and on the impact of the reforestation itself in the Araguaia Biodiversity Corridor. So welcome, Dimitro. We are super happy you are here with us. And it's right now 5 o'clock in the morning in Brazil. So I think it's great that Dimitro, we are working almost 24/7, but I think it's great that Dimitro is with us at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. Thank you, Dimitro. So just to give you just a few minutes of background, actually, I'm not a biologist or a forest engineer. I used to be a business person. I had my own company. When I finished university or business school, I started my company immediately and with a big dream to represent manufacturers in the Middle East. So my dream was to be market leader in 16 countries in the Middle East. It was quite a big mission. I had no experience, no money, and I didn't speak Arabic. So after 7 years of survival, so I lived 14 years in the Middle East itself. And the first 7 years was like a survival mode. And after that, it took off. And we grew, fortunately, 40% every year. So I handed over the company and moved to other dream missions. And one of my dream missions was to go through the Amazon rainforest from the start till the end. One was also not only by motorbike, but also by floating. So in Ecuador, starting in the mountains in Ecuador, and then all the way to Belém. After that, I got the vibe of the Amazon rainforest more and more. And one of my other dreams was to see a black jaguar in the wild. I thought it was quite easy. I thought it just takes only a few weeks. So I first tried 1 week, didn't succeed. Then I came back for 1 month, didn't succeed. And then I came back for the real serious impact. So I went over 5 months. I lived with indigenous tribes. I hired jaguar biologists. I hired even jaguar hunters, not to shoot, but just to see one. And living in the forest, in the trees for 5.5 months, I had the pleasure to see all the animals of the Amazon and the Cerrado, except the black jaguar. Other than that, I saw the incredible deforestation of the Cerrado and the Amazon. And I think, of course, maybe many of you might have this feeling, but I think if you drive through an area of deforested land for 400 kilometers long, continuously, and 1.5 years, or just 2 years before, it was intact forest. And this was for me after arriving, which supposed to be a journey of 4 days. We arrived in 9 hours to arrive to a place where there would be many black jaguars. So this was a point, maybe I thought this area is not only important for the black jaguar, it's not only important for the communities in Brazil, but it's important, it's actually crucial for the whole world. So instead of more money or more business, I changed my whole life. And time to give back, because we have only one life. And I thought, let's become a billionaire, but not in money, but billionaire. and for sure not on ourselves. So let's try to at least restore part of the vital ecosystems of the Cerrado and of the Amazon by helping to realize one of the largest biodiversity corridors on the planet. And of course, to become a billionaire, it's not fun to do it on your own. So you have to do it with power people, with teams, with etc. And that's where we are today. We started the Black Jaguar Foundation. We kept the Black Jaguar only as a symbol, but we have only one mission, is the ecological restoration of the Araguaia Biodiversity Corridor. So it has to be ambitious if we want to make an impact on the planet, either to do something on a big scale, or I think not to do anything at all. And I think the Araguaia Biodiversity Corridor is a mission big enough to make a true impact for Brazil and for the world. So the length is around 2,600 kilometers. Its width is 20 kilometers left and right from the Araguaia River, and even in the north from the Tocantins River. So it's around 10.4 million hectares, the total area. And out of the 10.4, we intend, or we will, not intend, we will restore 1 million hectares. So it's quite ambitious. So to do this correct, and to do this within 15 to 20 years, I thought it was super important to prepare well. So we invested 7 years only in preparation. So in order to get the right systems, to have the right nature organizations as partner, to have the right team, to have the right offices, to have the right, you name it. Because if you want to embark on such an enormous nature project, I think preparation is everything. And of course, now, even after all this preparation, like, for example, we carried out an impact study, which Joel will share later, to really calculate what's the true cost of the project and what is the true benefit for the planet. And we are very happy that we can tell you today that all these preparation elements have been completed. Finally, we have moved to the fundraising, and even much more fun, of course, the implementation. But I think if we want to scale up from 1 hectare to 10 hectares to 100 hectares to 1 million hectares, I think it's like setting up a large company. Preparation, I think, is everything. And be local. So maybe Black Jaguar Foundation is an English name. Okay, it will remain English. Maybe Joel, maybe are not Brazilian, but 80% of our team is Brazilian. And we are, I think, completely Brazilianized, if that's a word. Because if it's not Brazilianized, then it's never going to work. And I think now we see the power, what the impact it has for local communities, what the impact has for farmers. Because in short, we are working together with farmers. We work in line with the government. Otherwise, to restore 1 million hectares in 15 to 20 years is never going to be possible. So in total, we plant around 1,667 native trees per hectare as an average, and it comes down to 1.7 billion native trees. And this is only for the APPs, so for the permanent preservation areas. And this slide is around 6 months old. Before we use 42 native species. And today we are happy to share with you that we have increased the number of native trees to 53. And we are very fortunate to have the top specialist of forest engineering with us in our own team. We used to partner with the University of Sao Paulo Department of Ecological Restoration. And now we are fortunate to have these fantastic people like Dimitri in our own team. So Dimitri will explain you later on and share with you more details. This is a short video about the corridor itself, where it is today, and to give you an insight what deforestation took place and what the impact will be. So I hope this video has explained you a little bit about the concept of the whole biodiversity corridor. Before I pass on the word to my dear lovely colleague Joelle, I just want to share one last point. Is we see in the news always so much negativity about the destruction, about the fires, etc. But I think finally we have a project here of hope, because if we humans work together with local government, which already have an environmental regulation in place, which is actually better than any country in the world. No one talks, or you don't hear so much about Brazil being a positive example for environment. There's no country in the world, or hardly any country in the world, which has a better environmental regulation than Brazil. There's no forest code in other countries. So I think we should embrace it. We should embrace the partnership with landowners, because at the end, we all need to eat. We cannot tell farmers just to stop producing anything, because soon we will be with 9 billion people. And at the end, we need to eat. So if we can combine agriculture with forest, it's a win for humans. It's a win for nature, because they have to be together. And right now, we're already seeing the positive impact that by native trees in the PPAs retains the water. And without water, there's no agro. And without water, there's no life. So I think it's a great positive example. For sure, that biodiversity corridor will not solve all the problems in the world of all Brazil, but I think it is going to set a great positive example for the entire Brazil and for the planet. So I right now give you the word to one of my colleagues, Joelle, and she will take over from here for now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining this session. There's one headphone left here, by the way, if you want one. I was going to walk over to you, but then Ben was going to pass me the microphone. No, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. Yeah, so as Ben was saying, for us, the Brazilian Forest Code is really important. So I just wanted to outline to you a bit how it works. So depending on where in Brazil you are, the rule is that you need to preserve a certain area of your land for nature. This is where we come in as Black Jaguar Foundation. So we partner with the local landowners and help them to restore their areas, because not only do they lack the technical knowledge to do, but also maybe the financial means to do so. Next slide, please. So what does the Brazilian Forest Code entail? Well, so as I said, it's a legislation to help protect native vegetation. And at the same time, it only applies to rural properties. So that means local landowners who, in the case where we work right now, are usually farmers. And it helps to restore degraded areas and to bring them back to the original state of the ecosystem. Next slide, please. Okay, so as Ben was saying, we really focus on the permanent preservation areas. So the Brazilian Forest Code contains permanent preservation areas and legal reserves. The good side of the permanent preservation areas is that if you bring the areas back into the original state, they need to be intact forever. So even if the landowner changes, even if you want to take away a tree, you're not allowed to do that. So this is why we focus on the permanent preservation areas. And not only because of that, they also, permanent preservation areas are the areas next to water streams. And as we are trying to make a corridor, that's really helpful, right? Because we're making a corridor alongside the Araguaia Biodiversity River, the Araguaia River, sorry. And so all the areas next to the river, but also other water streams need to be restored by us and can never be degraded again. And of course, next to water streams and water sources is very important to be restored, because it makes sure that it avoids floods, erosion, and silting, for example, more in the north. And then that restoration obviously protects forests and also animals, and together they improve the quality of life in the region and beyond. Next slide, please. And then there's the legal reserves. So this is the other part of the forest code. And this area can be anywhere on the land of the landowner. And a landowner is allowed to do sustainable economical activities. So for example, agroforestry, so growing acai, having some forest fruits, and so forth. And the percentage of the legal reserves differences depending on where in Brazil you are. So if you are more in the north, it's more Amazon ecosystem. So you need to preserve about 80% of your rural property. If you're further down south, it can go down up to 20%. In the middle of the country, it's more or less 35%. And so we help the landowners figuring out what is the law, how it applies to them, and which areas of land they need to restore. Next slide, please. And so besides the forest code that obviously shows why our work is really important and to restore the Araguaia biodiversity corridor, we also did an impact study in 2019 to actually see what are the benefits of making such a large biodiversity corridor a reality. As Ben was just explaining, it's a huge area that we want to restore, and we want to plant over 1.7 billion trees. And probably all of you having a background in, I don't know, restoration, nature, conservation, you know how important it is. But there's also many people maybe that don't know. So we thought it would be a good idea to do a study. So we did a study for over a year with 11 scientists from the University of Illinois and Sao Paulo. And we also were granted a award from the Lehman Institute. The study was governed by a global advisory board and coordinated by our team here in the Netherlands and also in Brazil. The idea was really to illustrate not only the local positive impact, but also the global positive impact, focusing on social and economic benefits. And of course, the environmental benefits. Please, next slide. So just to introduce to you the Global Advisory Board, we thought it would be really nice because we had, for example, Jan Willem, Den Beste, who's also secretly hiding over there in our boards, and a few other people from all around the world in different areas. So to make sure that the study would consider many different fields and not only focus on only environment, only economic or only social impact. And together with the advisory board and the research team, we tried to make sure that the research process was conducted very thoroughly so that the results that we got from that, we still use them today and they remain super important to us today. Next slide, please. So just wanted to share with you a few ecosystem services that we saw as a conclusion out of the impact study. So obviously it improves the biodiversity, but also it allows for a lot of local jobs and it preserves critical water sources, which is obviously really important for us because we are restoring alongside a river. Please, next slide. And so I just wanted to share with you a few numbers. Please don't remember all of them, it's a lot. But we think what is really nice to know is that to realize the whole corridor, we expect to be spending almost
2.2
billion euros. And actually by doing that, we allow the planet to save 17.1 billion. So basically the cost of the corridor largely outcome the benefits. Also, what is really important to us is that we create a lot of local jobs. So in the area that we work, lots of people don't have access to jobs anymore because the area that we work has been highly degraded and deforested due to agricultural practices. And that allows for many people not to have any jobs anymore. So having a restoration project on this scale allows for almost 40,000 jobs, and we can train people in the area locally, ranging in different activities. And as said, we will be restoring 1 million hectares of degraded land back to the original ecosystem. Next slide, please. Yep. Yes. Oh, yeah. Good point. And so just for you to know, right now we are hiring 300 people to help us realize the first, restore the first 600 hectares. So planting 1 million trees. And these are all people from the local region that we work. My colleague Dimitro will tell about this a little bit more later. And so right now, I just want to explain a bit to you why the Araguaia corridor is so important, because it connects the Amazon and the Cerrado. And many of you may know the Amazon, but maybe not the Cerrado. So let us tell you a little bit about that, please. Next slide. So first, biodiversity corridors, well, they're really important in areas that are subjected to deforestation and degradation, because if you don't have any nature anymore, then species cannot migrate, species cannot grow, and so forth. So with the corridor, we're trying really to connect the pieces of land that are still intact and also bringing back pieces of land that have been degraded to their original state. Please, next slide. So first of all, I want to tell you a bit more about the Cerrado. Who has heard of the Cerrado? Okay, cool. Quite some people did. That's good news. So the Cerrado savanna covers almost 2 million square meters of Brazil. That's actually 1/4. It's really, really big. And it's actually containing 30% of Brazil's biodiversity, having a lot of endemic species as well. And they consist of different landscapes. So it's not only savanna landscape as we may be thinking, like only grasslands, but it also consists of more like forest, like small, low growing trees and savannas, of course. And also what we think is really, really important is that in the savanna, many, many rivers spring from there. So the Cerrado savanna really is like a sponge to many, many rivers and actually to the Amazon rainforest, which makes the Cerrado savanna even more important. Please, next slide. So just for you to know, so you have a little bit of a view on how it may look. So it's really different, right? So here you have more grasslands and a few palms, and over there you have more like small trees. So, but as you can see, it's really different from the Amazon biome, allowing for a lot of sunshine to reach the soil. So next slide, please. And obviously the Amazon biome. Well, don't need to ask you. I think all of you know the Amazon. And obviously it covers a lot of countries in Latin America, and actually 49, almost a half of Brazil. And actually a lot of carbon is stored in the forests in the Amazon, but also in the Cerrado, there's a lot of carbon stored, but that's more in the soil. And obviously the Amazon is really, really important for the larger rain cycles in South America and beyond. Please, next slide. So just to finalize, Ben already said, like, we're really trying to bring here a mission of hope and a mission of possibilities and working together with the local landowners. But also, unfortunately, the area that we work has been highly degraded and deforested. So there's been a lot of biodiversity loss, and due to the changing climate, weather patterns have been changing a lot in the area, actually making degradation of the land even worse. And we are already seeing that rain cycles are being disrupted. So for example, my colleague will tell about it more, but to do the ecological restoration, we are highly depending on the rain cycle, on the rainy season, apologies. And the rain season has been changing. So it's becoming shorter, it's becoming later in the year and less rains. So this is already influencing the area. So all the people that are doing agriculture, they're already seeing that the yields are going down and that actually they cannot go on like this. Please, next slide. So just to sum up, these two ecosystems are really important, obviously for the rain cycles, not only locally, but also globally. They allow for biodiversity. They are a huge, really, really important for drought relief. They filter fresh water. So a lot of our fresh water, about actually 20% of the water that we drink is filtered every year by the Amazon and the Cerrado together. They're an important source for modern medicines. And obviously they clean the air. I mean, you all know how important trees are to do that for us. And they are a huge carbon sink and altogether obviously allow for climate mitigation and adaptation. Next slide, please. Okay, and now I'm gonna give the word to my colleague, Demetrio in Brazil. As said, we are really happy that he's joining us in this early morning. I hope he's here with us. He's gonna be telling you a little bit more technical how we work and how we work with the landowners in Brazil. Demetrio, please go ahead.
Hello, good morning to you all, my conservation colleagues. Can you all hear me and see me well? Okay, you can, right? Okay then, so It is a pleasure to be here speaking to you today. My name is Dimitrios Kievenin. I'm project coordinator at the Black Jaguar Foundation. I'm a forest engineer, actually, with background in forest ecology and ecosystem restoration. And I joined BJF in early 2019 after working in other ecological restoration projects throughout Brazil. And mostly I joined for believing that this project can really make a difference ecologically, economically, and also socially to the interior of Brazil, the whole country actually, and also the world. So today in our conversation, I'll dive into the specifics of ecological restoration and what drives our activities in the field. So I'd like to start discussing what is the role of BJF in the Araguaia region. So as Joel and Ben mentioned, there's a rule that landowners must have a portion of their land with native vegetation, but some of them do not have that, either because the law was passed after. Thank you for changing the slides. Either because the law has passed after the land had already been deforested, or because legal mechanisms wouldn't allow them to restore their land back to nature. So if there's a rule that they must restore part of their land back to nature, if there isn't any nature in their land, why don't they do it themselves? And why do we need to help them? So Joel has passed through this already, but there's first a knowledge gap in restoration and all the processes that are involved in it. And many landowners actually try to do it themselves and end up frustrated for the poor results that they achieve. Then they stop trying and consider that it is cheaper and maybe even easier to just pay any fines or deal with the downsides of not having their land restored themselves, because it is easier. But we need those pieces of land back with native vegetation, right? And second, as Joel mentioned already, there's the cost. It is expensive to conduct ecological restoration projects, especially where ecosystem resilience is absent. So our role in the Araguaia region is to ensure we get healthy ecosystems and all the services that they provide back using a mechanism that facilitates acceptance by the landowners. So in the end, it is a win-win deal. That's what we want in the region. And also by creating a restoration economy, we will help promote green jobs and bring back revenue and dignity to remote regions of Brazil. So please next. Okay. Well, so one of the biggest challenges in ecological restoration is to scale it up. So usually projects are at small scale due to knowledge gaps, insufficient supply of seeds, seedlings, high costs, lack of incentives, either by the public or the private sector, and competition with less sustainable but more profitable forms of land use. So some landowners, for example, if they don't have the right incentive to do restoration, they'll just prefer to plant, for example, soybeans down to the margins of the river until they get a huge fine, you know. Next, please. Okay, so to make that possible, we must tackle all these challenges that I mentioned. So an alliance between governments, private sector, and NGOs in landscape level is needed. Research and development on ecological restoration, so we can close knowledge gaps, engage local communities, so they can be integrated in all process of decision-making, seed collection, seedling production, planting, but most importantly, environmental education. This last item is vital to change mentality and raise awareness in the importance of conservation, natural resources, fire prevention, and much, much more. So we have to do that in the field, everything, so we can engage people into the restoration projects. An engaged community, for example, that can notice tangible positive changes upon the existence of the restoration project is key. And also financial mechanisms are needed to fund the projects, but also to start positive feedback when we are talking about having economic revenue from the restoration itself, for example, as Joel mentioned, from the collection and sales of fruits, seeds, honey, and any other forest products that can be that we can get sustainable from with sustainability from these sites. Also, public policies are vital to make legally robust the need for restoring and conserving pieces of private land in Brazil. So the government in Brazil must monitor compliance with the law and ensure the different treatment between those who comply with the legislation and those who do not. So you cannot treat the same people who comply with the legislation and people who do not. And finally, as I said before, the creation of a restoration economy through the collection of seeds and stuff will ensure the community engagement and guarantee that the restored ecosystems will remain intact in the long term. It's not helpful if we just go there and plant trees, but the trees won't be there in 5 or 10 years. We need them to be permanent, right? So next slide, please. And just for you to have an idea where we are now, we are working in the very heart of the corridor. It is a municipality that's called Santana do Araguaia in Pará state in northern Brazil, but it's in the central portion of the corridor. And this is the part of the corridor that has the highest environmental deficit. It is actually a very interesting region to work in. It's where the Cerrado savannah meets the Amazon rainforest, or there's a mixture of ecosystems. Sometimes it's a very tall forest, sometimes it's a savanna according to soil conditions. So it's a region with very high biodiversity, a very good challenge actually to restore. And yeah, we estimate that there's an environmental deficit over 10,000 hectares to be restored in this region. So next, please. Okay, so in all of our restoration projects, our goal is getting back all environmental services that Joelle mentioned on her speech. So we must ensure the best practices in 17 steps that are shown in here. So gathering community, science with the planting and the caring for these restored sites is vital so we can have success in the restoration. So I'll just dive into these 17 steps on the BJF cycle of restoration, but just for you to know that restoration is so much more than planting a tree. We need to actually know the assembly rules of a given ecosystem so we can restore it properly. So next, please, I'm going to dive into it a little bit. So the first step is actually to partner with local landowners. So it all starts with that, partnering with local landowners, because restoration will be conducted within their land. So this step is key because we must convince them of the advantages of working with us and the importance of restoring part of their land. So meetings, workshops, courses, advertising material, everything is crucial. So you can see here meetings, for example, in this images that are happening with our articulation, with our field team, and also the material that we use to try and convince them to be part of the project. So in the field, we actually have a team that exclusively dedicated to the relationship with landowners, right? So next, please. Yeah, and once we talk to the landowners, the next step is to map their land. So we map land use within a property. Our goal in here is to identify all environmental deficit and which parts of the property can be restored to form biodiversity corridors. So it's a huge work. We have a person in our team that is just doing mapping. She's a real good professional. So yeah, so in here, the objective is to assess which parts of a property needs restoration. Next, please. And then after we map, we need to go to the field and assess the sites that we mapped before. We need to check every feature within the landscape, and this process will help us in deciding the best restoration technique to be applied, the logistics involved in restoration, and also the costs, right? So we call this process validation. It's confirming, basically, what was mapped previously. Next, please. Okay, then we proceed to planning ecological restoration itself. all steps involved, actions that will be taken, deciding upon the best restoration techniques, time schedule for that site. It's a very interesting and also fun part of the work. Next, please. Then we proceed to soil preparation. That must be done before rainy season starts. So as Joel mentioned, rainy season in the Araguaia Biodiversity Corridor goes from October till March. So that's when we get most of the rain in the year. And we need to prepare the soil before rainy season starts. We prepare the soil to get either seeds or seedlings. And some soils have been severely degraded from decades of misuse and erosion. So we must take care of them properly so we can get the best results. Next, please. And then when the rains return, usually from October till March, as I mentioned, we conduct implementation activities such as planting and sowing. Next, please. But it is important to say, as I mentioned before, that things don't end with planting. We must take care of the seedlings that we've planted for at least 3 years to ensure that they will develop well and don't lose competition with invasive exotic grasses. So this is a thing we have in Brazil. So our native grasses are not very good for pasture land, originally. So many grass species were imported from Africa, to be used as food for cattle, but they became invasive and they compete very harshly with native species and also the trees that we plant. So we must take care that these exotic grasses won't compete with the seedlings or seeds that we plant. After 3 years, however, it is expected that the young ecosystem can carry on without any human intervention, and I'll explain why. Next, please. Meanwhile, we monitor each restoration site to ensure that it is following the expected trajectory towards a restored ecosystem. When our team decides a given site isn't developing as expected, then we take actions such as adaptive management activities to try and correct its trajectory. So you can see here in these images the development of a planting site. So we've planted seedlings. This is one of our restoration sites. The left-hand side picture is a site that is 4 months old, and then 1 year after planting, this is the same tree. So it is vital that we follow how this site is developing, if it's developing into a healthy ecosystem or not, and what actions can we take to ensure that there will be a very good trajectory towards a restored ecosystem. So next, please.
If I may just compliment Dimitri to this slide.
Okay.
As you all see, what Dimitri mentioned, the left picture is a seedling which was only 30 centimeters high when we planted it. 4 months later, with the amazing growth, it's more than 1 meter. And a year and a half later, is that correct? Or 2 years later?
Yeah, actually, it's just 1 year later. In this
1
picture.
year later, I think it's quite amazing, right? That this little seedling of 30 centimeters turned into an adult tree. And not an adult tree, of a tree of 2 years old with more than 3 to 4 meters. So if we humans help nature a little bit with the right care and the right monitoring for the first years, I think nature is coming back as stronger as ever before. So I think we have, in this element, a beautiful job, because we are just helping nature and actually indirectly ourselves to restore life. Sorry, Dimitri. Yeah.
No worries. Next, please. Yeah, so also in this picture, you can see a seedling that was planted in late 2018 and then 1.5 years after. Next, please. Okay, so when the goal is to restore a forest, so mostly in the Amazon region, we try and follow the principles and assembly rules of a naturally recovering forest. So what am I trying to say when I say assembly rules? So whenever a forest undergoes a disturbance, it follows certain steps naturally that can culminate in many alternate stable states of a non-degraded ecosystem. So it follows a certain trajectory towards non-degraded ecosystem, right? However, when soil has been heavily degraded or seeds don't arrive or invasive grasses heavily compete in a given site, these steps towards a non-degraded state, they don't happen without human intervention. So these so-called ecological filters need to be overcome. So what I said about invasive grasses competing, the non-arrival of seeds or saplings, degraded soils, they're all ecological filters that stop a given site from recovering itself naturally. So then we must do interventions, and that's what it is. What is ecological restoration? So next, please. Okay, so we divide the process of restoring a forest in 3 phases according to the latest discoveries in restoration ecology, which is the science behind ecological restoration. And these discoveries were provided by the Forest Ecology and Restoration Laboratory of the University of São Paulo, which used to be our partner in ecological restoration. So we have these 3 phases: the structuring phase, in which we rebuild a forest-like structure; the consolidation phase, in which we guarantee that this structure will be permanent and that biodiversity will increase; and then we have the maturation phase, in which an ecosystem maturates into one of many alternate stable states of non-degradation to provide all environmental services that Joel mentioned before. Next, please. So how can we do that, right? So when we plant trees, we divide them into 2 groups. We have the fast-growing and good shading species, which will rebuild the forest structure, shade out invasive grasses, because these invasive exotic grasses, they don't grow well in shading conditions, and they will alter microclimate in the understory for late successional species to arrive. And we also plant diversity species, which will ensure that the structure is permanent and that ecosystem will have enough biodiversity to sustain itself and to be as close as possible to a native forest, for example. Then we like saying that our goal in restoration is, first, to create the forest structure, and then guarantee the consolidation phase and root maturation. So what we need to do is guarantee the first 2 phases, that the 3rd phase will happen naturally. Okay, so next, please. But when we restore a savanna, it's a whole other story. So none of the rules that I just showed you, they apply to a savanna, right? Because it is a savanna, it's a grassland formation, and there's no shading out of exotic species. So we must look at all aspects of that ecosystem, right? So native grasses, bushes, and trees must be introduced in such way that it represents the original characteristics of that ecosystem, right? In some places, for example, no trees will be planted, for it used to be a grassland originally. For example, in other places, we'll plant all 3 forms of life. But just for you to know that it's much harder to restore the Cerrado savanna than it is to restore the Amazon. But it's a good challenge, as we say. There's no bad challenge. Everything is good challenge. Next, please. So for each condition, we use one of these different techniques to restore a degraded site. So in the total absence of natural regeneration, we either plant small trees or we sow seeds of native species. When some natural regeneration is present, but it isn't able to cover the entire site, we densify it by planting trees or sowing native species in the gaps. And when natural regeneration is present, but it is species poor, for example, we can also introduce some species that are crucial for the consolidation phase. Also there are cases in which natural regeneration is present in good density, but good density and diversity, but it is unable to grow because of many ecological filters that can be jeopardizing its development, for example, exotic grasses. So our role then is to remove such ecological filters and ensure that those small saplings can develop into a desirable successional path. So from right to left, we have bigger site degradation, higher site degradation, more intervention, more intensity intervention, and also more expensive restoration. When we go from left to right, we have better sites to be restored, sites that have better resilience, that can recover itself naturally with just a push from us, from human intervention. But each site has a different and specific condition that must be assessed whenever we go to the field, and we need to assess that in person. Next, please. So I'll talk now about some challenges and opportunities in our project, and maybe to inspire also some other projects of large-scale ecological restoration. Next, please. So I would say that the main challenge right now has been engaging with landowners. Due to the political scenario in Brazil, the implementation of the forest code is happening very slowly, and some landowners simply choose to wait to comply with the forest code, see what happens. And also building trust at first with landowners is a little bit hard in the beginning. It used to be harder in the beginning of the project. Now it's becoming a little easier because once landowners become partners, people feel safe. They know that that farmer that is his or her friend are partnered with us, and they feel more confident in partnering with us. There's the opportunity of getting economic revenue from the restoration with sustainable practices. And this is also a good argument for convincing landowners. For example, well, that piece of land won't be totally unproductive. It'll just undergo a different production system. So this is a good argument as well. There's also the opportunity of creating a different and more eco-friendly agribusiness with a new market for that landowner, new opportunities, new market opportunities, and also maybe a higher added value for their crops and their selling this. And also some landowners are also touched by the fact that they are making a difference, and building a better world for their children and for future generations. So we have here in this picture a family that owns a farm, that it is our partner, and we planted 30 hectares of forest restoration last year within their property, and they're really happy and proud to be part of our project. And here they are holding some of the seedlings that we planted within their farm, açaí seedlings, cupuaçu seedlings, and all these native species that are part of the ecosystems in the region. Next, please.
Sabemos que a regularização ambiental é algo.
Okay, yeah. Good advertising material is also a must investment in bringing landowners to our side. So it must be clear what we offer and what is expected of them. This is a video that we use to share. We use in the field to share in WhatsApp groups, for example, which is their main communication way in the field. And it is a video that we created to present ourselves to them, our role, what we do, what is expected of us and of the landowners. It is in Portuguese. I don't know if we have subtitles, but I would like to play it, please, if possible.
Algo complicado. Nós, da Black Jaguar, queremos ajudar você, proprietário rural da região do Araguaia, a adequar suas terras ao Código Florestal. Proprietários rurais, que já são nossos parceiros, estão muito satisfeitos em fazer parte do nosso projeto. O Código Florestal exige que você mantenha as APPs e a reserva legal com vegetação nativa, mas muitas vezes esta vegetação já não existe mais. Em uma parceria imperdível, ajudamos você a recuperar estas áreas. Fornecemos as mudas, as sementes, os adubos, defensivos e todo o conhecimento e suporte técnico qualificado. O proprietário fornece a mão de obra e o maquinário se puder. A Black Jaguar te ajuda na restauração e na manutenção, e você ainda contribui para a conservação da água e da polinização das culturas na propriedade. E juntos, formamos um extenso corredor de biodiversidade para proteger a bacia do Rio Araguaia, preservando o futuro para as próximas gerações. Bacana, né? Para participar, basta ter a posse regular da propriedade e estar até 20 quilômetros do Rio Araguaia. Mande mensagem para 94 984 36 13 89 ou um e-mail para participe@black-jaguar.org.
Yeah, so this is the video that we use to advertise our project in the region. Next, please. Yeah, and this is the brochure that we use. It's also a printed material, actually, with all detailing of how our project works. I think one of the core strategies is to make the landowners the protagonists of the story. They are the heroes of our project, and they must feel like it, because they are, you know, restoration in the end is happening within their land. Next, please. Yeah, and as I mentioned before, the creation of a restoration economy can also bring back jobs once lost for the switch to mechanized agriculture in the region. So as Joel mentioned, this used to be a region that has a lot of cattle ranching, but now it is switching to modern and mechanized agriculture. So many jobs were lost in the process. So we also help through this restoration process to create job opportunities in the region. So all these people that you see here in this picture, they helped us in planting in the last rainy season. And they're all from a poor neighborhood in Santana do Araguaia, where there's high rates of unemployment due to this switch to mechanized agriculture. So it's a very good opportunity for creating jobs, for example. Next, please. And we also have a partnership with the local government in Santana do Araguaia, the administration, which happily ceded the land for the construction of our new nursery. Is this a video or not? I don't... Yeah, it is a video. So just so you know... Yeah, you can go ahead. Sorry.
Temos um único projeto, que é o Corredor de Biodiversidade do Araguaia. Nesse corredor, o que nós fazemos é a recuperação de áreas degradadas, a restauração ecológica de áreas de preservação permanente e reserva legal dos municípios que estão no Rio Araguaia. E o nosso projeto é nisso, desde a sua nascente ali no Parque das Emas até a sua foz em Belém, quando ele encontra em Marabá o Rio Tocantins, o Rio Araguaia, e passa a ser Rio Tocantins até sua foz em Belém.
Eu quero agradecer imensamente à Fundação, ao nosso prefeito municipal e Câmara Municipal por essa parceria. Meu muito obrigado.
Já temos vários parceiros e temos outros em prospecção. E de antemão, gente, eu quero só agradecer, porque hoje é um dia muito especial e a gente fica até sem palavras, tá? Obrigado a todos.
Não só socialmente, como um dia nós vamos ter a sala ecológica para fazer educação ambiental aqui e incentivar as pessoas a cuidar também do meio ambiente, não só em campo, mas também na cidade, que isso é muito importante para nós. Obrigado a todos.
Um lugar atrativo para o povo de Santana do Araguaia, provar que seremos fortes na agricultura, na pecuária, mas também seremos fortes na preservação do meio ambiente de Santana do Araguaia.
Em outubro vamos contratar mais que 300 pessoas e seria fantástico continuar a dar mais realidade e mais importância para a agroindústria e também com a natureza, porque precisamos dos dois. Sem os parceiros com Câmara, sem parceiros de SEMA, não podemos continuar no futuro. E por isso também quero agradecer ao prefeito, senhor Eduardo da Machado, a energia dele e a visão dele para o futuro de Santana do Araguaia é fantástica.
Yeah, great. So what you saw here is the handover ceremony of the land, in which we are now building our nursery, our new nursery. This new nursery, just for you to know, will have the capacity of 500,000 seedlings per year. So it's a very big nursery, one of the biggest in Brazil, and the biggest we ever built as BJF in the region. But moving on, one of the opportunities is also for local communities to thrive, for example. And as I mentioned previously, by creating a restoration economy, we'll help the community, we generate revenue, and we also maintain existing forests alive through seed collection, because it is better for them to sell seeds to us than to chop down a tree, for example. Next, please. And also, it is another opportunity for gender equality. So the economy of restoration can be a source of empowerment for women, as they can have education and their own revenue in the restoration economy. For example, as nursery carers, planters, seed collectors, coordinating our activities. For example, we have here Norivania, which is our nursery coordinator. So it's a very good opportunity for gender equality in the economy of restoration. Next, please. And finally, by restoring, we have the chance to improve the science behind restoration itself. So by researching and improving our restoration techniques, we also improve the science behind ecological restoration, which can help all restoration projects in Brazil and also in the world. Well, that was what I was meant to say today. Now I'll give the word back to Ben, and thank you all for listening.
So we are here almost to complete our presentation for you, but I would like to conclude with some of the slides and messages that, as I said earlier, we as humans are very good in destroying the planet, but I think it's also amazing that we can set an example that humans, with effort, with energy, there's hope, as you have seen it before. If we work hard and we make farmers proud, we make Brazilians proud, we make the planet proud, that we can do magic as well for the planet. And I think this project is something, again, it's a mission of hope, where we will involve many people with new jobs. We will create an enormous positive impact on biodiversity. It's a win-win-win. As you have seen earlier, I almost want to compliment Dimitro in his presentation, that we also make the municipalities proud. So the municipality of Santana do Araguaia donated to us 3.6 hectares of land, almost in the city center, for the coming 10 years. And in the beginning, we had to explain them what we do, and they almost didn't understand. But then they start to understand, like, wow, actually it is also a win for us, because we can show the world that Santana do Araguaia can be an example for environment and agriculture, because we need both. So now they've become super proud. They will take all the other mayors to this area, and it becomes a bit easier for us to scale up, because we moved to the other municipality, and the mayor of the other municipality said, oh, how can we help you? Because we also want a nursery. We also want to hire and get more jobs in the ecological restoration economy. So again, together we can make a difference. Is a super clear message. And I think we have shared a lot of words and we have shared a lot of text and science behind it. So I thought it's nice maybe to share with you a 2-minute video of the planting season of last year. So I think other than the work and of the trees and the biodiversity coming back, I think it's also great that you can see the smiles on the people who work. Because the planting team, before they were maybe almost like a number for a big farmer, and with us they are a human being. They have a name. They have their own Instagram accounts. They share. So, and also we aim to pay them a bit, or in the future, quite a bit more than the minimum. So then they, yeah, so it becomes a win. So let's share this short video of last year.
A Black Jaguar tem como único projeto o Corredor de Biodiversidade do Araguaia. Esse projeto consta em promover a restauração ecológica de propriedades rurais que estejam até 20 quilômetros das margens do rio Araguaia e em toda a sua extensão. Em Santana do Araguaia já começou os projetos de reflorestamento e estamos na primeira fase da restauração nas fazendas Santa Fé e Cedro.
Esse projeto é muito bom mesmo, acho que de grande importância aqui para a nossa região.
Esse reflorestamento é muito importante porque a gente tem a obrigação e o dever de manter as florestas nativas aqui em volta, até mesmo para os animais silvestres que tem aqui na região.
Faz 3 anos que nós somos parceiros do Instituto Black Jaguar e nesses 3 anos nós já plantamos 30 mil mudas em áreas de reflorestamento aqui na fazenda, em áreas de APP e reserva legal. E nesse próximo ano a gente também está plantando mais 30 mil árvores, divididos em áreas de semente e áreas de muda.
E para os próximos anos, atingirmos uma meta de 600 hectares de reflorestamento.
Esse serviço que a gente está fazendo, que é um serviço que serve para as novas e futuras gerações que está diante aqui do nosso planeta Terra, sabe?
Todo o corredor de biodiversidade do Araguaia e da Black Jaguar só é possível com doações de empresas e pessoas físicas de toda parte do mundo. E sonho que se sonha junto é mais fácil de se realizar. E com o apoio de todos os envolvidos, é possível transformar vidas, restaurar ambientes e gerar impacto socioambiental positivo com a restauração ecológica. E aqui em Santana do Araguaia é só o começo do projeto dos corredores de biodiversidade do Araguaia.
So I hope this gives you an impression of how the work looks like in the field itself. And this was with a team of 48 planting, restoration men and women. And then, as I said earlier, in October, we will hire close to 300 persons from the region. Of course, this is still a first step, but I think this is how we do it. We go step by step. We don't shout, we will promise the world everything. We cannot just jump to 1 million hectares in 5 years. We learn and we learn more and then we improve. So where are we going and where we are today? So in our pilot projects, we restored 60 hectares of around 120,000 native trees. This rainy season, we will complete the first 1 million native trees, which is approximately 600 hectares. And then our goal is to complete the first 6,000 hectares by 2025. So it's approximately 10 million native trees by either methodology of restoration, maybe by seedlings, maybe by muvuka or direct seeding, or maybe by natural regeneration. So just to share with you short, the first 6,000 hectares is for just still a learning curve, because so many new elements we are learning every day, how to approach different kinds of farmers, because there are very small ones, medium-sized, large ones. There are also settlements. So we see till 2025 that we are in a learning phase before we, after that, scale up in a real way. But still, by 2025, over 1,400 people will work in the field, and that's already 1,400 jobs. So it is step by step going. And I think it's fun to, it's amazing actually, to see the nature coming back, water retaining, farmers becoming more proud, employees getting jobs. So that's why I think Joel and me and all the team at Black Jaguar Foundation have one of the best jobs in the world. Maybe next slide. So here we are. Maybe we've explained so much. It's not easy to share one of the largest biodiversity projects on the planet in 1 hour and 5 minutes. But maybe you have some questions, and then Dimitro, Joel, and me are happy to answer any of your questions as good as we can.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for a really inspiring presentation, and your work is clearly paying off for communities in terms of equality opportunities and income, and I'm very inspired. Thank you. My question is, along with the government's law, the Forest Code requiring landowners to restore 30% of land, which is a big ask, is there any support from the government that they're providing, like education programs, subsidized inputs like seeds? And if so, are you collaborating with these initiatives that the government's offering? Thank you.
Maybe Dimitro?
Yes, I can answer that. Actually, there is, but it is a bigger incentive from local state governments than from the federal government itself. There used to be some incentives that are now a little bit frozen and actually very slow right now due to the political scenario. So that's why we find that it is our role to step in and help these landowners. But there used to be some incentives, and there are some still from local governments, but usually they don't cover 100%, and they are not enough, right? So we must step in.
Sorry, and can I also just add, because I learned from Dimitrio the other day that if landowners don't comply with the law, they may get fines, or if they want to get a loan at certain banks, they can't get a loan if they can prove that they comply with the law. Sorry, I just wanted to add that, Dimitrio. Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Can you please introduce yourself first?
Thank you. My name is Emmanuel Smith, and I'm from Liberia. I'm interested in restoration program because deforestation and forest degradation is something that spreading across the world. And I want to thank you for your presentation and the level of work that you are doing. It's so interesting. But I got two questions. The first question is, there are so many causes for deforestation and degradation. What are you doing to address those causes within the region to avoid further deforestation or degradation? And the second question is, I mean, it is an ambitious project. I'm like thinking, is it possible from your assessment to restore all of the ecosystem services from those degraded lands through your project? Is it something that you see possible, that your project will be able to restore all of the services, or are you targeting a particular ecosystem service to be able to restore? Because it's not an easy thing from what I know to restore, I mean, everything at once when it is destroyed. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I will try to address your first question, and then I'll pass on maybe Dimitro for the second question. So your first question is, what do we do to in the corridor region to stop more deforestation? correct? So in our case, of course, it's super important that we help stop deforestation in other parts of Brazil, but in the region where we work, either everything is already deforested or it's already partly preserved. So 70% of the areas in the whole corridor region have been deforested, but not recently, already many years ago. So our scope of our area of scope is in areas which have been long time already been deforested. And of course, we love to be involved also in work to stop illegal deforestation, but I think this mission is big enough to complete in coming 15 years. So this is our focus.
Can I also add one other thing as well? So Demetrio explained that when we do the restoration, we're taking a lot of different steps, right? And one of the things that we recently started doing as well is training local fire brigades. So for example, when there are fires, that they don't have such a negative impact as they would before. So for example, the area that we work, they lacked a fire brigade when we started working there. So now we have been training them and also providing them with equipment and building natural barriers to make sure that, for example, the fires were also obviously a huge cause of the degradation in the area, don't have such a huge negative impact that they used to have in the past. Just wanted to add that. And then Demetrio, did you want to elaborate on the ecosystem services that we're trying to bring back?
Mm-hmm. It is a very good question, actually, because those of us who work with ecological restoration, we know it is very hard, if not impossible, to exactly copy an ecosystem and rebuild an ecosystem that used to be there before. I mean, restoration hardly can compensate deforestation. It's like it's like switching a huge building for like a smaller building, but still a building, you know? So as you said before, as yourself said before, it is important to bring back the ecosystem services. So it's our focus to bring back ecosystem services more than actually trying to imitate the natural existing ecosystem. Of course, we want to have it as close as possible to the natural ecosystem, but we know that this is very hard and it will only happen in the long term. So yes, we focus on this ecosystem services, especially erosion control, water resources conservation, maybe rain cycle as well, because it is very important for Brazil. Pollination, for example. So all these environmental services are directly affected by our restoration activities. So yes, all these environmental services, and of course, carbon capture, which is something that will happen eventually once these trees are growing.
Does that answer your question? Yes.
So, hello. Well, I would like to give you my congratulations for this really inspiring project and also courageous project. I would like to make two questions. The first is, as fauna is very important for restoration of vegetation too, such as through pollination or through seed dispersion. I know your task is already big enough, but are you planning to eventually translocate fauna to comply or to help on these restoration tasks? And the other question is, if along the path that you are restoring, if there are dams or projected dams, because in that cases, restoration is very specific, and it also includes some very specific degradation patterns of vegetation, also the associated fauna. Thank you.
Maybe I can answer the questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, so about the first question, So far, we don't have any projects regarding translocation of fauna because we believe that by planting the right trees, the right species, the fauna can be easily attracted to the restoration sites. So I didn't mention here because it will be diving into maybe too deep for this conversation, but within those two groups of species that we plant that I mentioned before, we have also functional groups. And one of these groups, actually two, we have two groups within that group that, for example, one is fauna attracting species, for example, that give big fruits or fruits that can attract birds or mammals, and also species that attract bees, you know. So we believe that by restoring these ecosystems and creating a forest-like structure, for example, naturally the fauna will come back and occupy those spaces. So right now we don't have any plans of translocating fauna. We are just expecting for the fauna to return. But in the future, if we think it's needed, then we can partner with other NGOs and institutes that have such projects, and they can help us doing that as well.
And also, if I may add to that, for example, what we saw, one of the trees that was only 18 months old, there was a dove making a nest. Do you call that like that? Yeah. So there was a dove making a nest, and like we saw some monkeys going through the restoration sites. And I mean, last time when we were there, a few weeks ago, we saw birds coming in and out. So you already see that if the trees are growing, that they already attract species naturally as well. So thank you for your question. And Dimito, did you also want to reply on the dam question, or can I?
Sorry, I was on mute. So within the corridor, we have one big dam, which is the Tucuruí Reservoir, which is a hydropower dam. As far as I'm concerned, there are no big projects of dams anymore in the Araguaia region. The one that there is already there. And I think what we can do in this dam is to restore its margins. And because all the other environmental impacts are already there, you know. But by restoring its margins, we can ensure that this reservoir has a longer life, for example, because we prevent soil erosion. And by doing all that, we prevent the need of constructing other dams, you know, because that dam needs to be enough, you know. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's, yeah, kind of. But we don't have other projects for dams in the Araguaia corridor.
To complement, Dimit, thank you, is one of the reasons the Araguaia River and the Tocantins River were chosen to make this biodiversity corridor, that it has only one dam. Thank goodness. So there are so many other rivers in Brazil, and every 400, 500 or 600 kilometers, there's a huge hydro dam. So politicians have kept this as like a pristine, relatively pristine river for the future. And that's why I think it's great that we can use this area to restore the biodiversity on its banks for a long distance.
Yeah, there was a question.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Not exactly a question, but I work in the Araguaia region. Unfortunately, we have several dam projects on tributaries of the Araguaia right at their mouth, and a great number of smaller irrigation dam projects where the dam is not for hydroelectric generation, but for them to be able to pump water out of the river for irrigation. So this is a growing threat. I'm afraid that the government is not maintaining the Araguaia pristine, and it's going to be a big thing in the future, because the more they build these dams, not only do they interrupt the water flow, not only do they affect a possible corridor, but they're doing them to pump water out. The Araguaia one day will be like the Colorado River if this keeps up. It will not reach the sea.
So all the reasons that we have to keep on working is to restore the biodiversity and partner as much as we can.
Can I answer that as well?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So yeah, as far as the tributaries of the Araguaia, Not all the tributaries of the Araguaia are within the corridor range, because as you've seen before in the presentation of Ben and Joel, we have the corridor is 40 kilometers wide. So yes, some of the tributaries of the Araguaia have projects for dams, and not huge dams, but those dams that you mentioned on irrigation of agriculture and what we call in Brazil PCHs, which are like small hydropower plants. Unfortunately, this is something, especially that this is out of the 40-kilometer range, which is the region that we decided to work in. It's a little bit out of our control. We just hope that these projects will follow or try to follow all of the environmental laws that there are in Brazil for licensing and compensating. And if we can minimize the impact of these dams, if they are ever come to be built, then I think it's our mission, and it is our goal, you know, to minimize all these impacts. And if we restore the margins of these tributaries and also the margins of the Araguaia River, and also preserve these portions of land within rural properties that need to be preserved, I think it's better than not having them, right? And we do what we can, right?
Hello, yes, thank you very much, first of all, for this very inspiring communication. And thank you also for your message of hope in this field. My question is, as you are planning to reforestate more than 1,000 and thousands of hectares, and you are on degraded lands, where are the seeds come from? Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a really nice question. Dimitrio, I think we have recently also dealt with, well, getting seeds from everywhere in the region, because obviously you cannot just buy them anywhere. They need to be collected in the region. So Dimitrio, do you want to elaborate a bit on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right now, we rely mostly on seed collectives for seed collection. And the good thing is that they are mostly based on traditional populations, for example, indigenous people, and also local communities. And as I mentioned before, it can be a really good source of revenue for these populations. One of our biggest supply of seeds is the Xingu network of seed collectors, which is within and the surroundings of the Xingu Indigenous Reserve. But we're also starting a new collective of seeds in the Araguaia region. Actually, we kind of started that in the past couple of weeks by accident, because we needed so badly seeds, and we kind of had to improvise a seed collection collective in the region. So then there was this woman that took leadership of her community to collect seeds and sell them to us. And it is happening already. And if you want to check a little bit of how it went, there's a video on our Instagram account that you can watch of us bringing a new load of jatobá fruits from this new collective of seeds. And it's a very nice video. I recommend you to watch it.
Just as a last thing to add, Dimitrio, I think I was there a few weeks ago with Dimitrio, and to add there, like Dimitrio is always on the look for seeds as well. So thanks.
So thanks for this hopeful and powerful story. And I think, to me, part of the power is the well, the strong focus on action and hands-on getting things done, entrepreneurial attitude of the whole initiative, and the energy that comes with it. So with the ambition and the scale. And I think it will be very interesting. It should be very interesting for all kinds of companies that are now looking for investing, but perhaps also compensating things that they do. So my question is a bit about your, it's a bit more the values and the principles behind the fundraising, because I can imagine that there's companies interested in compensating their CO2 footprint or whatever they're doing by giving you a lot of money. Do you have principles for accepting private funding?
Yes, I think great question, Konrad. Everything what we do, if each person who joins our mission, first we check what are the values of the person. If the values of the person meets the values of our foundation, it's a win-win. If the person doesn't really wants to contribute to a greener future, a better future for the planet, then there's no match for the person to join. And the same, we have 8 values in our foundation, which we check for any funder. So if the company or private person doesn't share its values with our values, there's simply no match. And then I think in the past 2 months, I have told more than 6 companies, okay, your company is great. I think you as a person, really nice, but the values do not match. Because the only thing you want to do is to contribute to the Black Jaguar Foundation, but you don't work on sustainability on any other front. So then it becomes almost like a greenwashing. So then we tell them, thank you very much. Let's have a cafezinho. And after the cafezinho, ciao, ciao. The more, and it sounds a bit strange, but the more selective we become, and the more almost tough we become towards allowing companies to join, the better and the more fun it is to work with better companies who really show that they work on 8 fronts. And one of the 8 fronts is contributing to the Black Jaguar Foundation. So I think in the future, we will be even more strict, because of course, we don't want any greenwashing. And 2, one wrong company, one wrong person will destroy the work of the past 10 or 12 years. So we will stay more strict in the future even.
So I think we're doing one last question, right? Because we need to round up, but so we're taking your question for sure. But if anyone else has some other questions after that, feel free to come over to us and talk to us and reach out, because we're always happy to see what you're working on and how we may connect and help each other. So thank you.
Hello, thank you for the amazing presentation. Actually, I have 2 questions. One is, I was wondering if you are open to research partnerships or partnerships with universities. I'm Brazilian, I'm from Belo Horizonte, and I'm an ecology student here in Marseille. And I was wondering, like all I thought during all the presentations, that it has a huge research potential also in those areas, in terms of like developing new ways to also do reforestation. I think Brazil also has a huge potential concerning agroforestry and permacultura. And so I was wondering if you were open to those kinds of initiatives in like related to also Brazilian universities, but also Europeans. I think it's everyone that could be involved would be really wow. And also my second question is, how is your interaction with the indigenous communities and in the indigenous areas that you're showing in the video in the beginning, that there are some indigenous areas included in the conservation project, and recently there was this huge pressure in the indigenous areas in general in Brazil. So I was wondering how is like your interaction to those communities, and if the recent context impacts it or not, the project.
Maybe I'll try to answer the first question. And
can we have a short answer, please?
Short, yeah. So we would love to get more students and researchers involved, but we are now working 7 days a week to make sure that we restore the 600 hectares now. And I think once we can sleep a bit more, we have a bit more time, we'd love to get more and more researchers in. But for now, we are not having too much of the time. And on the second question, maybe you can answer, Dimitru, that in the areas where we are working right now, that doesn't cover directly indigenous territories.
Yeah, right now, as Ben said, our action is not, can you hear me?
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Not yet.
What is happening?
Just hold on 1 second.
Okay.
See if they can get your sound
Hello?
back. No.
Hello?
Well, I can shortly reflect on the answer, and then later on you can address Demetrio as well if you would want to know more about it. So as Ben said as well, so we focus really on one area right now. So Santana de Araguaia, as Demetrio showed us on the map. And in this area, we're not directly, our work doesn't directly connect with indigenous reserves. But for example, for the seed collecting networks, we do depend on some indigenous reserves or people from indigenous areas. And I mean, of course, in the future, that's going to be something that is really important for us to be incorporated. So to be really honest about that, right now we're not so much involved yet. So I think that's it. And I think about the research thing, that's something we can also discuss later on as well. Demetrio, I'm sorry I couldn't incorporate your beautiful answer, but I'm sure people love to hear all from your work. And we'll round up now. And if you have any further questions, please reach us. Thanks everyone for listening.